Hey everyone, my name is Jennifer Leary, and I've been asked by the Sales Enablement Collective to present to you today on building successful enablement teams from the ground up. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, and I hope you find the session to be helpful. So I want to start with a quote and a visual. I feel like these are great ways to have impact with your audience, and what we've got here is a mountaineering team climbing Mount Everest, and a quote from Henry Ford. If everyone's moving forward together, then success takes care of itself. Now, look, we know there's posters, right? All this stuff like about teamwork, no I in team. It's really true, right? And we're going to talk about that today. But essentially, Henry Ford was a huge business industrialist who had major impact. And he, like others, recognized that it's never done alone. And that teamwork is something that increases efficiency, productivity. And we're going to hear about some statistics around that now. So why are we here today? We're going to talk a little bit about scaling teams from the ground up and what that takes and why companies and communities and organizations even think about doing that. So here's some statistics to kind of chew on. 97% of employees and executives believe a lack of alignment within a team impacts the outcome of a task or project. 97% is a really big number. It's almost 100%. So we're all in agreement that if a team doesn't have a common goal and they're not working together, we're going to not get the optimal outcome that we're looking for. 54% of employees say a strong sense of community, great coworkers, celebrating milestones, and a common mission have kept them in a company longer than they originally thought that they would. And then finally, 99.1% prefer a workplace where people identify and discuss issues truthfully and effectively. But unfortunately, less than 50% are saying that that's actually happening. So transparency is really critical. These are all things we know, but sometimes it's nice to see the numbers to kind of see where we are today against some of those aspirations. So who am I and why am I qualified on this topic? So like I said, my name is Jennifer Leary. I've been doing enablement for about 10 years and product marketing before that. And, I've had the really amazing opportunity to have done this about 3 or 4 times now with small tech startups in the Boston area. Currently working for Shift Technology, which is based in Paris, which is giving a whole different flavor to scaling a global team. And it's been really fun so far. So I do have direct experience building and scaling what I believe to be effective teams, have proven out to be effective teams from the blank canvas, I call it. I've also had the privilege of recruiting, hiring, mentoring, and working with and for some really amazing companies and amazing teams in that process. I guess that makes me qualified to understand the challenges and the opportunities that are associated with starting, from that blank canvas. And I can appreciate and validate the benefits that a strong team can provide. And obviously, lots and lots of lessons along the way. So in this session, you'll learn about how to strategically build your team and how to think about it like a consultant and not just jump in and really start hiring without some thought behind it. I'll talk about key hires to get you started and to build a solid foundation, the skills and the mindset to look for. And then finally, what are the positive team dynamics that you want to lay the foundation for and how to ensure that long-term success for your team and for your business, not just the first 6 months or the first year, but throughout the course of the lifetime of the organization where you're all going to be driving success. So let's jump in to the first step. So strategic thinking. My next slide talks about thinking like a consultant, but basically, the first thing I ask is I step back and I say, okay, we've got a blank canvas here. So who will this team serve? This enablement team that we're building, who are they serving, right? But I don't start right at the point of the individuals, but I pull back and I look at the size of the organization, right? Who's in the organization? Is it a large organization? Is it a small organization? Is it a global organization? Are we going to be supporting a team within a much larger global framework, or are we driving a team within a small startup of 50 people? That all impacts sort of who you hire and where you start. That goes along with goals, long and short term, budget, timing, who we're going to support, and then getting into the nitty gritty of like, what do they do every day? What are their roles? How are they measured, right? If we don't understand that, then we don't know what our tasks are and who we need to hire to meet those objectives. The landscape of the interdependent departments, really important because there are functions that we can't really do our job without. And it's nice to understand how robust those departments are, right? Do we have lots and lots of folks in product marketing delivering content? Do we have a really robust operations team that's got Salesforce and all the tools that we need? Or are we working off spreadsheets with one person, right? Like all these things, none of them are bad, but we have to know that in order to figure out how we're going to staff our team and drive success. So knowing those interdependencies and then understanding the status of them is really critical before you think about your hires. And then finally, your metrics. How are we going to measure success based on what we're going to do together as a team? So like I said, it's really important to think like a consultant. One of the things I do is I come in and I ask a lot of questions and I go through that sort of key consideration list in order to understand what do I need to know so that I can then really think strategically about who do I need to hire and then what is my plan going to look like. So within those key considerations, there's different constituencies that I go to kind of do my discovery, right? And at the executive level, it's more the top line questions around, that macro understanding of where we are today and where we want to go, that kind of as is to be state, and the time frame around it, because that will help me understand who I can hire now and then who I can promote and hire under in order for us to expand to meet the scaling needs of the company, right? And then for sales leadership, it gets more into that secondary level questioning of who needs to be trained, what's your hiring plan, how many people are you hiring and when, how are we going to measure those folks, and then where are they going to be, right? Because that's really, really important in terms of supporting geographically dispersed teams, language issues, translation requirements, et cetera. And I mentioned operations and marketing and product are really important for us to understand kind of the content piece. I always think of enablement as people, process, content. So we're talking about the people in terms of our team and who we're supporting. Process meaning tools, and then content obviously is coming from product in terms of product roadmap, product marketing, messaging, et cetera. So that's a little bit about building out your strategy. For a second step, I really think that I always think about 3 key hires that I typically want to make in the first 6 months, depending on the size of the organization. And those are an onboarding specialist, continued education generalist, or a program manager, program coordinator. So I'm going to get right into these 3. Onboarding specialist is super critical because companies that are scaling are usually hiring and they're hiring fast. So that means that you could be in a situation where you come into an organization and you're expected to put together a really strategic plan, doing all of your thinking like a consultant and doing all your research. And then the CRO taps you on the shoulder and says, oh, by the way, we have 15 people starting in a month. So you kind of look over your shoulder and say, oh, wow, we need an onboarding program and we need it fast. Now, I've been in situations where I've put that together and run that myself, but that doesn't scale because it doesn't allow me to execute against the rest of my plan. So this is someone I like to hire quickly. And often I'll look within the organization to see who might want to be on the enablement team, who already knows the product, who already has relationships across the organization, because that can just decrease my ramp time significantly. And I can teach them some of these key skill sets in order to execute really strong onboarding programs and content. But key DNA, even if that person's in the organization or if they're not, is, they've got to have high energy, keep people engaged, because onboarding is, it's drinking from the fire hose, and it's a lot, and it's new hires, and we want them to have a great experience. We want them to feel prepared. And for sellers, we want them to feel confident that we can send them into the market, ready to hit their goals and not having huge knowledge gaps or competency gaps where they're not feeling prepared when we hand them off to their sales manager. So I'm starting with the last bullet, but that high energy good listener is really important to keep people motivated and engaged. Often we've had people in onboarding that say at the end of boot camp, like, this isn't for me. So another piece is sort of having that emotional awareness to weed people out if they're not a good fit, or get them to the right set of stakeholders to help them if they're already struggling in onboarding. So process-driven, multitasker, strong product knowledge skills, has relationships in the org, can collaborate, and obviously, it goes without saying, has to be an excellent presenter, great communicator, and just really emotionally aware and intuitive to the changing needs of onboarding, right? Because in my mind, it should always be iterative, and we should always be going back and seeing how we can improve and what we can do better, kind of class to class. So that's the first key hire. Second key hire is like this generalist. So I think of buckets. You've got your new hires, you have your ramped folks, and then you have your managers. And managers are ramped, but they're being professionally developed into another role. So sometimes that is an additional hire. I'm not going to list here, but it's somebody that maybe in 6 months to a year after we've proven things out, I'll go ask for someone to help with professional development, transitional roles, moving into management, et cetera. But back to the generalist role, this is a key hire. And this for me is kind of your right-hand person. So someone who can sit with you, whiteboard with you, and can really execute against the strategy that you're putting together. Often I'll look for a former seller or someone who's close to the sales process, because again, truncates the ramp time, and it makes for a really relatable experience with our revenue generating teams, because they've been in the trenches. They understand how hard it is to sell. They understand the challenges. They understand the comp structure. They understand things that matter to salespeople. And so often I'll look for someone who's sold before. And sort of key DNA for me here, again, the high energy, can easily pivot, iterative, take an idea from concept to delivery, like pretty easily and pretty intuitively. But somebody who's assertive enough that they can hold their own in front of an audience of mixed tenure people, right? We've got executives, we've got sales leaders, we've got probably a really wide variety of tenured account executives in the field. So it has to be somebody that is going to earn the respect and be able to be authoritative enough to deliver content, deliver programs, and obviously they have to be valuable, but they have to kind of win the hearts and minds of people that may think, hey, I'm hitting my number, I don't need enablement. So those are some of the really key DNA criteria that I look for in this hire, because this is someone who you might hire as a manager that's going to become your director over time. So executive kind of level thinking is really important here, and ability to manage. For me on these hires, I'm always thinking, where could they be in a year? Not where do I need them right now, because that's how you're going to scale and expand along with the org. Final role that I always hire is the project manager, project coordinator. This is really, really, really key. And sometimes if I only have a certain amount of budget, I'll split a role just so I can get this person in the door, because the project coordinator is so critical to maintaining kind of what I think of as the back office activity, and that keeps everything running, right? The learning management system, uploading content, reporting, managing events, kickoffs, QBRs, ordering swag, all those things. You're all enablement professionals. You know how much time it takes, how much attention to detail it takes, how much you rely on these folks to get this stuff done. I had the pleasure of working with some really, really strong project coordinators who've gone on to do great things in enablement and outside of enablement. It's a wonderful entry-level opportunity. As long as somebody has sort of this core DNA for this role, I'm happy to hire them without enablement experience and grow them into a next level enablement role. So again, someone inside your org, outside your org. Key DNA to look for here is obviously super, super strong attention to detail. They can execute flawlessly and independently, multiple ability to manage multiple projects, likes to figure things out, likes to deal with spreadsheets and numbers, really get in and chase things down until there's an answer. And obviously likable and respected within the organization, because they're going to be supporting and working with a lot of different people to get things done. The other thing I would add to this role is the ability to manage up, because there's a lot of chasing people down and keeping people on time and on track. So that's another thing I would look for in this hire. So the third and final step is, once you've done your detective work, you have your strategy for your enablement plan, and then how you're going to resource against that plan, then who you're going to hire and what you need from those folks. The third step is probably, how do I create a positive team dynamic with all these amazing hires that I've really strategically thought about, and how do I make sure that they want to stay on the team, they're learning, and we're all successful together, right? Back to our Mount Everest diagram at the beginning. So The first thing I would say is understanding sort of who's on your bus, why they're there, where they want to go. There's lots of statistics around employee satisfaction and feeling valuable, feeling that they're contributing and that they're recognized for what they do. So, take the time to really understand who's there and kind of why they're there and how they work with other folks on the team. I've done a lot of personality assessments at sort of team offsites and things like that, just so people understand how they think and then how the way that they think works with the way there are other people on the team and the way that they think, so that everybody has an understanding of, I might not attack the problem that way, but I can appreciate the fact that Jen does, right? That's been really, really helpful. I think a nice transition to that is to make sure everyone understands their role and how it fits into the overall picture, right? No one's doing anything in isolation. So everyone's role definition and how they're tackling it is really, really important. And describing that to everyone else, right? Like, Jen's role is this, and this is how you work with her together on that. And why don't you guys go brainstorm on that, right? I love sort of a horizontal team where everyone understands each other's objective and how it rolls up to the common objective. That just goes along with establishing collective goals, encouraging transparency, a culture of transparency, and make sure they're learning. We had an education budget at Toast, and I always encourage people to spend it, use it. I would send people on trainings. I had a woman who worked with me who wanted to get a little bit more experience in HR because she felt like a lot of her coaching that she was doing was, getting to a point where she needed more help on and developing more sort of people skills, and so things like that. So I've always encouraged a lot of learning. I consider that you're extending your education and always doing the right things, reading, book clubs, peer-based groups, spending time outside of work. All those things really, really help with positive team dynamics. So sort of some top 10s that I think about for ensuring long-term success are: talk to your team, try not to miss your one-on-ones. This is standard stuff, but it's stuff I've had to remind myself of. If anyone who's worked for me is watching this, they're probably rolling their eyes because I did move a lot of one-on-ones, but I try not to. Promote your team individually and collectively, right? Like, socialize the ideas that they come up with and give them credit for it, right? I always try to hire people that, are smarter than me or better than me or have more potential, because I want to know what they think, right? I want to help them get better. I want them to advance their career. So I'm a big advocate of socializing individual ideas and promoting individuals, promoting teams, getting them involved on those all hands calls, right? Like, give them a stage and let them do their thing. So ask them to answer hard questions. This is a good one. I had to work as I came up through the ranks as a manager, hard to not answer questions for them and turn the question around and say, what do you think? What would you do? Another thing about anyone who's worked on teams with me before is I always say, I'm happy to hear the roadblock, but you got to bring at least one solution, preferably 3. So, ask them to answer the hard questions. If they want to advance, it's only going to get harder. So I think teaching people to fish, teaching people to do that early and often is always a great thing to do. And it's handing off the baton in a really wonderful way for professional development. We talked a little bit about setting the tone. This is more about if you're leading the team and you're scaling a team, it's going to be stressful because the company's scaling, there's a lot of pressure, but you've got to set the tone that you have the right team in place, that you've thought really critically and surgically about who you've hired and why, and kind of setting that tone, encouraging them that they are in the right seat. And if they're not, then let's talk about it and figure out where you need to go. But just setting that tone of moving forward, solution oriented, I think is really important. And obviously being transparent, not leaving people questioning things. We talked about providing educational opportunities, move people if they aren't happy. That's a big one. I have had people that have come to me and said, I don't think this role is for me. And I'm like, great, let's get you where you need to go. I'm happy to do that for you, right? You got to move quickly in scaling orgs. If someone's not working, don't hang on for 6 months. That's 6 months. You could have had someone else being really productive and they could have been happier. So have those conversations if they're hard. It's okay. I like to pull out the job description and say, let's go over your job description again. Let's look at the job you accepted and let's go through it. Do you still want to do this? If not, it's okay. Like, let's figure out where you need to be. Understand your team, what makes them tick. What I mean here is it's tempting to look at other teams and what they're doing, and that's helpful. But you got to get to know the players on your team, what motivates them, why they care. And I think that's just a really important thing to do to keep people happy. And number 10, and probably most important, is just listen and advocate, right? Listen and advocate, listen and advocate. That's what I think keeps people happy. Recognition, I would probably throw in there as well, but sort of just some top 10 tips to make sure this strategic team that you've thought about, hired, and built stays positive and helps the business get where they need to go over time. So kind of wrapping up in this session, like we talked about, we learned about how to think strategically about building your team, some key hires to get started, to build a solid foundation for and the skills and mindset to really look for, and then the positive team dynamics around how to ensure long-term success. Those are some of my top tips for building and scaling enablement teams that get a lot done with, what might start out as a small core group of people, but then can expand over time. I hope you found this session to be helpful. If you ever have any questions or would like to reach out, you can send me a message on LinkedIn. But just want to thank the Sales Enablement Collective for having me today, and all the organizations that have hired me to build these wonderful teams, and all the people that have been on them. Look forward to seeing you again, working with you again, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Take care.
Hello, everyone. Hey, everybody. Can anyone hear me? Okay, super. Thanks, Carla. Just making sure. Okay, hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to my session today. It was a lot of fun to put together and share my experiences on building and scaling teams. There's some great questions here. I'm going to just kind of go through the chat and answer some of the questions. Carla, if there's something else you want me to do, just shoot me a note here. The first question that I see here is from Julie Nash. If you're building the function for the first time, how do you think about the timing of your first hire? So that's a great question, and it's really dependent on what you're walking into. And I would strongly advise during the interview process that you have that conversation, because setting up and standing up an enablement program all by yourself is really fun, but really challenging, only because you'll get stuck in the weeds pretty quickly on setting up systems and just trying to understand how to make things, how to execute without being able to focus on the next step of the strategy. So the answer to that question is, I probably would hire someone within the first 6 to 8 weeks. If I could, I would have likely negotiated that up front, and then been willing to wait a couple of quarters to really round out the team. Again, a lot of dependencies on the size of the company, the size of the sales team you're supporting, et cetera. But again, if it were a really small team, I would probably start with, like I mentioned in the presentation, either an onboarding hire or a project manager, depending on the dynamics of the team we're supporting. So Lindsay, I love the reminders on team dynamics. What is critical feedback you've received in building these teams from your team members or leadership, and how did you pivot it all? So I would say probably the biggest takeaway collectively is I've worked with a lot of high growth companies, and that's sort of the topic of this team, is scaling teams from the ground up. And I think the big pivot is always the job you start with, even within enablement, isn't necessarily the job you're going to end up with. So you have to be able to understand that if you're going to be part of a team that's scaling and a company that's growing, your role is going to change, and setting that expectation and setting a culture where change is good and people can embrace moving into a new role as a growth opportunity is probably something that I've had to pivot a lot on. And as I mentioned again in the presentation, sometimes people want to be part of that growth, and other times they end up moving on to a different team or leaving the organization. So that's something that I think is important to create as a culture and a team dynamic right from the get-go if you're working for scaling teams. Thank you so much, Virginia. Enjoying the talk. Wondering if you have any tips for embedding a sales enablement culture where none existed and where there might be resistance to change. So this comes up a lot. And it's a really good question. And my number one piece of advice for that is to do a lot of listening before you start making recommendations and getting buy-in from the teams that are on the ground floor, whether it's sales or marketing or engineering or even executive team. They don't want to be told what to do. So coming in, listening for about, a month, 4 to 6 weeks, doing that detective work, collecting all your information, understanding the culture, meeting people, traveling to different offices if you can, and then working together to present a kind of, this is what I heard is needed, collaborative approach, so that you're adding value with them as opposed to coming in and telling them what you think they need, is the absolute best way to attack that and overcome that. If there's resistance to enablement, education. I think every company I've worked for, I've done a what is sales enablement, what is revenue enablement, and I talk about what I talked today. It's a strategic function that has tentacles in the rest of the business. We move needles forward in the following ways. We're a partner to you, as opposed to, we know everything. We're going to tie your certifications to your comp, and, you'd better do the training. So it's really just, it's more of a marketing approach and understanding your audience and understanding how to meet them halfway and assure them that you're adding value as opposed to being overly directive. So hopefully that answers your question. Liron, let's see, a great presentation. What about the skill set of the person doing the hiring? What skills should you have to manage the team and increase the impact of the team? I'm wondering if you're talking about the recruiter. Feel free to just send a quick DM if you're not. But I think, or the sales manager, I can't really tell. But I think essentially whoever it is, we have to bring them up to speed on exactly what the dynamics of the role are in relation to the function of the organization. So sales enablement and who we support, what we're trying to accomplish, just make sure they're really well versed on that, so that they're actively recruiting for the right DNA and the right skill set. I think I'm answering that correctly. I've hit issues with the remit for enablement and product marketing as lines have been blurred. So there's actually a great roundtable on product marketing, product teams and enablement teams that you should probably try to attend, because we get into a lot of that. But essentially, it's a good question. And I think before enablement was its own function, it was part of product marketing. You'd have a product manager that's responsible for a product. The marketer would own the messaging, and the training, right? And the competitive intel and all of that. So the way that I work on that is product marketing kind of ends once we've developed the persona and the buyer and we understand their needs, and they have given us high-level messaging. And then it heads over into enablement world when we're talking about competitive advantage, handling objections, and making sure that the salesperson knows everything there is to know about the product, the good and the bad. So we really find that when it comes to launching a product marketing, like I said, builds the persona and the messaging, and then we kind of take over with competition, objection handling, discovery, questionnaires, guides, playbooks, and basically the talk track to bring it to market, to bring it to the customer. Great question, though, because that's something that is different in every company and tough to figure out. There was a lot in there, Gabriella. Sorry, there's so much to talk about. Biggest red flags when using my approach. Biggest red flags are sellers that come onto the team and think enablement's really easy. and don't understand the heavy lifting that's involved, that's a big red flag. And I mentioned I love having salespeople on the team, but you have to explain to them that enablement is all about strategic thinking, and they have to be really open and honest that while they might bring great skill sets in terms of understanding the audience we support, they have to come up to speed on how people learn, a little bit of marketing, a little bit of understanding how to position products and things like that. So that's something that I look out for. I say I would also look out for hiring too quickly, hiring the wrong people, and not utilizing all your budget. If you get budget to hire people, put your plan together and hire the right people. And I would say hiring people that are unwilling to change. You got to suss that out in the interview process and explain to them that their role might change. And those would be some red flags I would look for. Andy Ellis, nice to hear from you. Let's see. Thank you so much. Yes. Oh, just saying thank you. I thought you had a question. Good to see you too. Thanks for coming. Appreciate that. You're welcome, Gabriella. Julie Douglas, I like the idea of running a what is sales enablement session internally. Yes, so critical. Everybody, that's so important. Executive team down. You'd be shocked how many people don't know exactly what that means. And you want to take the opportunity to set the example within your org, because that's your strategy you're going to execute against. Who do you typically do this with? Revenue leadership, only cross-functional leadership, the entire revenue team. I literally start the exec team. Given obviously the size of the company, but at Shift, I had the execs, my first audience was the exec team. And that's obviously, you're going to build a modular deck where you're high level with them, what it is, what we accomplish, what our objectives are, how we measure ourselves. And then when we talk to sales, it's slightly different, service is slightly different. But I build something, and then I also put it obviously in our onboarding so that people can, when we're hiring new people, everyone's expectations are set on what we consider sales enablement and how we run it, and what being part of that team is going to be about. So, great question. Okay, I think those are all the questions. So, Carla, I'm not sure. You're welcome, Julie. Not sure if we just sign off now or what, but I hope you enjoy the rest of the session. There's been so many great presenters. So thank you again, Carla, for having me today, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Take care.